Block 1. The dawn no one can explain. The Carter family tried to hide it for weeks, but that night, something happened to the boy that no one could explain. They agreed to allow the recordings, but they imposed one condition. None of them would appear in front of the cameras. "It's to protect Evan," they said, and they explained nothing more. The crew arrived on the outskirts of Twin Falls, Idaho, when the sky was still caught between the cold blue of dawn and the fading gray of night. The air smelled of wet stone. Their breath came out in small clouds, dissolving quickly in the light wind. The field felt too quiet. Evan was sitting on a fallen log, staring at the horizon with a calm that didn't match his age. A family member watched from afar, motionless, as if every movement had to be measured. He inhaled slowly, as though waiting for something in the sky to answer. "You heard it, right?" he said, looking at no one. The camera wasn't fully adjusted yet, but the recording already captured the texture of his voice. "What I said at dawn, it wasn't a dream. It was a memory that came back distorted, a memory that doesn't fit well into the words from here." The light touched Evan's face in a curious way, creating a bluish shimmer for just an instant, as if some foreign color had passed through the air. He kept his eyes on the horizon. "You call that thing 3-Eye Atlas, right?" The director froze. That name had never been mentioned anywhere near him. Evan spoke with serenity. "That name is yours. It was invented recently. Where I come from, it was never called that." The wind shifted for a moment and then stopped again, as if cut off. Before the 3-Eye Atlas existed, there was the mother star. It was enormous, larger than your sun. Its light was deep blue, but it wasn't calm light. It trembled from within. With every pulse, the air of my world changed its smell. He touched the log beside him, feeling the texture of the wood, perhaps comparing it to another memory. The smell was like hot metal, mixed with a fine dust that stayed in the air, as if the light itself was breaking into invisible particles. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if reliving something very distant. "The soil of my planet felt soft, but it was hard like cold metal. The star's radiation shaped everything from the inside. It created minerals that reacted to touch. When I placed my hand on them, the surface grew lighter, as if it were breathing light." The cameraman approached without making the sound. The sky had lines of bent light following the star's magnetic field. They moved slowly and sometimes made a sound like distant cracking ice. He kept his calm tone, as though describing something ordinary. "My civilization was ancient. The gravity of my planet was light. Our steps weren't heavy. It felt like we were always about to float. And our structures were made of light sand." He lifted his hand slightly, as if trying to remember the shape. The light sand appeared when the radiation intensified. It joined by itself, hardened, and formed transparent surfaces with patterns that moved when the temperature changed. At night they glowed. There was never complete darkness in my world. A silence cut across the field. Evan lowered his voice. "But the mother star began to die. It created internal spaces where light couldn't exist. And when those places moved, the entire planet felt it. It was like the ground breathed differently." He slowly opened his eyes. "Until the day everything changed. Its light grew pale. The soil vibrated as if it were trying to detach itself. The mountains shone like never before." He lifted his face, staring at the Idaho sky, as if trying to find the exact color he remembered. "That was the moment when it was born. The crew stood completely still. Its real name is Thayer Loon. The word came out with a short, almost imperceptible vibration, but dense enough that everyone felt it. Evan concluded, "What you call Three-Eye Atlas began there, but you still don't know what really happened after that." Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss incredible stories like this. Now, what the boy will reveal in the second block will leave you in shock. Block 2. The Interior of the Mother Star. After Evan pronounced the name Thayer Loon, the crew remained completely still, as if any movement could interrupt something that was still unfolding. The field had returned to absolute silence, and the air felt heavier, denser, charged with unmoving electricity. Evan watched the sky as though trying to locate a specific point, something only he could see. The director moved the camera closer without speaking. There was a subtle tension in the team's breathing, something between caution and fascination. And then Evan continued with the same serenity. Thayer Loon's birth wasn't just an explosion. It wasn't an accident. It was pushed outward, as if the star had spat out something it could no longer hold. The boy tilted his head, remembering the moment everything began. And then Evan continued with the same serenity. The mother star was hollow on the inside, not entirely, but in parts. There were immense spaces where light couldn't exist. They were like pockets of living shadow moving slowly inside the star itself. The audio operator frowned. It was like hearing someone describe the interior of a sun with impossible detail, and yet Evan spoke as if he had seen it. When those pockets came close to each other, the star changed color. It wasn't just blue. Sometimes it turned too white, like it was burning something invisible. Other times it went dark, as if it were swallowing its own light. The wind blew again for a few seconds, carrying the scent of cold earth. Evan brushed his hand along his arm, not from the cold, but from memory. The soil of my world felt all of this before we did. It vibrated from within, as if it were part of the star. That's why we said the star had a breath, and the planet followed its rhythm. He lowered his head, as if recalling a very specific moment. I remember the night when its light became unnaturally pale. My family was gathered near the light sand structures. Their surfaces changed color when the temperature shifted, and that night they were nearly white, as if they had been emptied. The camera captured the boy's expression, calm, yet filled with something the team couldn't name. The lines in the sky began to shake. They never shook. The bent light always moved slowly, like currents, but that night they thrashed, as if trying to break free from the air. The cameraman adjusted the focus. His description didn't sound like imagination. It sounded like memory. That's when the star roared. He said roared carefully, as if the human word wasn't enough. It wasn't the sound of an explosion. It was like the space around it had been stretched until it tore. And when that happened, the interior of the star opened. The director pressed the headset closer to his ears, unsure of what to expect next. "It was a tear," Evan said, lifting his hand and spreading his fingers. "A tear of dark light. Something that made no sense. It wasn't brightness. It was absence. An absence so strong that it pushed everything around it." He swallowed calmly. Thayer Loon came out of that. Not the way you imagine. It wasn't launched like a stone. It was pushed, as if it had a life of its own, as if it knew exactly where it needed to go. One of the technicians shot a quick glance at the director, but no one interrupted. "My civilization was there," Evan said. His voice grew softer, as though the weight of the memory was too large for a 7-year-old to hold. "We felt the shock pass through the soil. The light sand structures changed color so fast they looked like they were melting from the inside." The light of dawn finally began to rise behind the canyon, but it brought no warmth. The air remained still, filled by the story the boy carried. When Thyrlune emerged, the star couldn't withstand it. It shriveled, as if losing strength. Parts of it collapsed inward, others were forced outward. And the sound passed through everything. It wasn't low or high, it was inevitable. Evan looked down at his hands, as if expecting to see traces of the past still clinging to them. After that, the sky of my world was never the same. The lines of light became unstable, the magnetic fields began to fail, and we understood that balance was gone. Everything that existed there was beginning to die. The relative in the background shifted uneasily, but said nothing. Evan lifted his gaze again, fixing it on the exact point where the sun was slowly rising. But that wasn't the worst part. What happened after Thyrlune left our system is something none of you would be prepared to see. The camera stayed fixed. The air seemed to lodge itself in the team's throats, because Thyrlune didn't leave alone. He took something with him. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion is important for this discussion. Get ready, because what comes in the third block about the boy's life is truly astonishing. Block 3. What Thyrlune took with it. For a few moments, Evan remained staring at the sky in silence, as if still trying to find human words to translate something that should not fit inside Earth's vocabulary. The low sun lit only the side of his face, revealing a strangely calm expression, far too calm for someone describing the death of a world. The crew waited. No one dared interrupt. Then Evan continued. When Thyrlune left our system, it didn't leave empty. It carried fragments of the mother star, not pieces of matter, but parts of what it was on the inside. The audio operator pressed his headphones closer, trying to understand what that meant. The star had internal structures you don't know. They weren't gas, they weren't plasma. They were like veins of solid light, paths moving within it, holding everything together. When Thyrlune was pushed outward, some of those paths tore loose. He touched his own hand as though still feeling the vibration of that moment. Those fragments screamed when they were ripped out, not a sound scream, a light scream. I heard it inside my body. Everyone did. The wind blew unevenly, carrying a faint scent of warmed earth. The cameraman stepped forward, feeling the temperature shift without explanation. These fragments, Evan continued, clung to Thyrlune before it crossed the edge of the system. It was as if it had absorbed parts of the star. The dark light you see today is just the remainder of what stayed trapped in it. He lifted his eyes again, searching for something in the sky. The elders of my civilization said that object should never exist alone. It carried the signature of the mother star, a mark, something alive, but not in the way you understand life. The team remained in absolute silence. When Thyrlune passed through the last arc of light in the system, the entire sky changed. The energy line slowed, grew pale, as if losing strength. The radiation that kept our planet stable began to fail. Gravity became unstable for hours, sometimes too light, sometimes too heavy. Brian breathed more deeply, recalling the irregular movement of the ground. The light sand structures began to deform. Their internal patterns, which always danced slowly, became still. It was as if their heart had stopped. The director clasped his hands together. The emotional weight was clear in the boy's voice. My family tried to shelter in the inner chambers, where the radiation was more stable. But even there, we could hear the star suffering, not in sound, but in light. It flickered like it was trying to survive what it had lost. The Idaho sky grew brighter, but something in the air remained far too cold. When Thurloon left, it began pulling things behind it, not physically, but in energy. It left a trail that destabilized everything. The space behind it seemed to bend, lose shape. The lights in the sky curved in ways no one had ever seen. Evan looked at his hands again, as if something still vibrated in them. Everyone realized that it wasn't just an object. It was carrying what remained of the mother star. And wherever it went, it would carry that scar. The cameraman stepped a little closer, but suddenly felt the temperature drop. When Thurloon vanished into the last fold of light, the mother star began to collapse inward, slowly at first, then in a way that felt endless. It was like watching a heart being drained. And we understood, all at once, that this was the beginning of the end. The boy's voice became almost a whisper, not of fear, but of memory. The light changed, the sky changed, and the soil became far too silent. In that same instant in Idaho, the crew felt it too, a heavy silence, as if part of the air had been removed. Evan lifted his gaze one last time. That's when we began to understand the star wasn't just dying, it was calling. And it wasn't calling for us. A shiver crossed the team, though no one commented. Evan continued, because Thurloon did not leave alone. It was being followed. The audio operator's breath caught, and what followed it did not come from our system. It didn't come from anywhere we knew. He closed his eyes. It was something the star itself tried to expel before it was destroyed. Total silence. If this story is gripping you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We bring incredible stories like this 3 times a week. Get ready, because what comes in the 4th block shocked even the most skeptical viewers. Block 4. The presence that followed Thurloon. Evan's memory left the Idaho field even quieter. The crew felt, without understanding, that something greater was about to be revealed. The boy kept his eyes fixed on a point no one else could locate, as if he were seeing through the sky, as if that place had a kind of transparency only he could perceive. When he spoke again, his voice was steady, but lower. After Thurloon left, the space behind it didn't remain empty. The light didn't return to normal. The sky didn't correct itself. It was as if the universe itself had been pulled out of place. And that's when we understood it wasn't alone. The cameraman adjusted focus, barely breathing. The thing that followed Thurloon had no defined shape. Evan said this slowly, as if trying to translate something impossible. It looked like shadow, but it wasn't shadow. It was denser, as if made of absence, an absence that pushed everything away. A single gust of wind blew and stopped abruptly, as if interrupted. It appeared when the star's light failed. It wasn't visible all the time, but when the star pulsed wrong, you could see its outline. as if space were being folded backward. The director felt a shiver that didn't match the temperature. Evan said, "The elders said it didn't originate with the star." Evan took a deeper breath. It was something that came long before, something that fed on flaws in the light. And when Thirlun was created, it became the brightest and most fragile point at the same time, a perfect target. The boy looked down at the ground as if listening to something the crew could not hear. The presence followed Thirlun from afar, not in a fast chase, but like someone waiting for the right moment. It seemed to understand what it carried: fragments of the star, the scar of its internal pulses, the signature of its light. He raised his hands and moved his fingers as if drawing something invisible. On my planet, we saw it before we understood what it meant. The skylines became distorted, being pulled toward a point where nothing should exist. We didn't know it then, but that was the trail of this presence, trying to get closer. The audio operator swallowed hard, remembering the strange voice the boy had emitted at dawn. When it finally crossed the boundary of our system, everything changed again. Gravity began to fail. But this time, the failure didn't come from the star. It came from it. Evan pointed toward the horizon, eyes still locked on the imaginary point. The space around that thing looked crushed. You could see the stars bending, as if they were being folded inward. And when it approached the mother star for the first time, the star reacted. The crew instinctively leaned forward. It pulsed in a way we had never seen. It wasn't light trying to escape. It was fear. The star tried to push that presence away. It tried to expel it. Hearing the word fear from a 7-year-old made the director hold his breath. And that's when everything began to get worse. Evan continued. The star weakened when it tried to fight. The internal cavities grew larger, deeper, as if something was digging the light from within. The boy squeezed his hands lightly, remembering the physical sensation. I felt the vibration in the ground. My family felt it too. Our light sand corridors darkened. They dimmed. Their inner glow faded. They were losing energy, losing life. The sun rose higher in the Idaho sky, but the air remained cold and unmoving. The presence following Thirlun kept coming closer. It didn't seem to be in a hurry. It was as if it knew the star wouldn't last much longer. And we began to understand Thirlun wasn't the final target. The cameraman raised the camera slightly, feeling a soft pressure in his ears, as if the altitude had changed. The target was the mother star. It was what that presence was searching for. Evan lifted his chin, staring straight at the sky, not at the sun, not at the clouds, but at something no one else could see. And that's why Thirlun was created. The star wasn't trying to survive. It was trying to escape. The crew exchanged stunned looks in total silence. It pushed Thirlun outward to distract it, to draw it away. But it didn't work, because the presence wasn't after the object. It was after what created it. And when it found it, it took everything. Absolute silence filled the field. Share your opinion in the comments. It's important for this discussion, and send this to someone who loves stories like this. Get ready, because what comes in the final block will make you rethink everything you understand about life.
Block 5. The last moment before the silence. The sun had already risen over the Idaho field, yet the brightness didn't seem to fully touch the place where Evan sat. It was as if a thinner, colder layer of light lingered around him, separating him from the rest of the morning. The crew watched in total silence, as though any human sound might disrupt something still being spoken by the air, by memory, by whatever was moving through that 7-year-old boy. Evan took a deep breath, and his voice came out calm but carrying a weight far larger than him. When the mother star collapsed, it wasn't just an ending, it was a transformation. Something ceased to exist, but something also opened, as if space had fractured from the inside. The crew stepped a little closer. The wind was nearly motionless. The air felt strangely dense, heavier around the boy. Internal chambers, Evans said. They were made of thick layers of light sand. That material reacted to radiation, absorbing some of the instability and creating a field that held heat and luminosity. But even there, you could feel the collapse. He placed a hand on his chest, pressing lightly, as if he could still feel the vibration he described. The ground shook in irregular rhythms, as though the planet was losing its synchrony with the star. Gravity shifted in intensity. Sometimes it was so light our bodies seemed to float, other times so heavy it was hard to breathe. And all of this happened while the sky was being swallowed by the absence of that thing following Thierlune. The director adjusted the camera, trying to capture every nuance of Evan's expression. "I remember the sound." His voice softened even more. It wasn't a human sound. It didn't come from the air. It was like a sound made of light, a vibration inside the stones, inside the ground, inside the chamber walls. A warning, as if even matter knew it was about to disappear. He placed a hand on his chest, pressing lightly, as if he could still feel the vibration he described. He looked down at the Idaho soil, as though watching two landscapes at once, the one beneath him and the one he had lost forever. "My mother held my hand when the first structures began to fail. She told me not to look at the sky, said it wasn't something a child should see. But I looked." He inhaled deeply, and his voice came out calm, but carrying a weight far larger than him. "And that's when the light inside the star collapsed. My mother held my hand tightly. I remember the sound of the explosion inside, but I couldn't see it. The light was too strong. But even though I knew the mother star was ending, there was a vibration that resembled something beautiful, as if the light inside the star had come to rest." The crew held their breath. "I looked at the sky and saw the light inside die out very quickly. It seemed like a flash of instant light, but afterwards, all we saw were the cracks in the energy field. At that moment, I knew the mother star was no longer going to be the same forever." The sound operator rubbed his arms, trying to chase off the chill. "After that," Evan continued, "the sky had no shape. The lines of light that always crossed the firmament snapped like overstretched wires. Some stretched until they vanished. Others contracted so fast they seemed to cut space itself. And in that darkness, it appeared." Evan slowly lifted his face, as if seeing it again. The presence. It wasn't shadow. It wasn't light. It wasn't matter. It was something that existed between those things. An invisible density that bent the space around it. Wherever it passed, the stars distorted, shapes curved. And it was alive. Not alive as you understand, but alive like a phenomenon that responds, reacts, observes. The director pressed a hand to his headset, feeling his heart speed up. The presence didn't want to destroy the mother star. It wanted what was inside it. The paths of light, the structures holding the star's core together, That was what it was following. That was what it was hunting. The light shifted slightly across the field as if a cloud had passed, though the sky was entirely clear. The elders said that presence didn't belong to our system. It wasn't a child of the mother star, nor created by local gravity. It had crossed through an ancient fold, a fold older than any of our memories. And when it found the star, it fed on her. Evan pressed his fingers together tightly. Thierlun was created to push it away. He was an escape, a fragment saturated with the star's energy, thrown outward in a desperate attempt to deceive the presence. But it knew. It always knew. The crew couldn't move a single muscle. When the star fell, my family and I ran to the deepest chambers, but the collapse was too fast. The light sand walls began to dim. Their inner colors died. The air became heavy, hard to breathe. And then there was a strange moment, a moment of absolute absence, as if everything, sound, light, time, had stopped. Evan let the silence stretch for several seconds. In that instant, I felt something pull me. Not physically. It was like my consciousness had been caught by a current that didn't belong to my body. I saw my planet drawing away from me, but not with my eyes, with memory, with the last part of myself that still remembered what it was to belong there. The entire crew leaned in unconsciously. After that, I woke up here, in the body of a child named Evan, and the first thing I felt was silence. A silence so deep, I thought there were no stars left in the sky. A gentle breeze crossed the field, as if responding to him. The memories took time to return. Some came too fast, like fragments thrown into my mind. Others slowly. Pieces I understood only when I recalled the smell, the light, the sound of my world. And then I realized that what survived with me wasn't the story of my civilization. It was the warning. The crew exchanged tense glances, unsure of what would come next. Because the presence that followed Thierlun didn't disappear. It keeps moving through space. Slowly, without hurry, like something that doesn't need to chase because it always reaches what it's looking for. The director felt a faint vibration in his chest, as if the air had grown heavier. And when you found the three-eye atlas, you touched a fragment of what remained of the mother star. A fragment that still carries memory and that can still be followed. What destroyed my world is still traveling. And maybe it's already closer than you think. Silence fell across the field like a curtain. No birds, no wind, nothing. Only the weight of a story that should not exist in the voice of a child. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to stay updated with incredible stories like this.